My son laughed at my old phone in front of 20 people. He held his wine glass, looked at the cracked screen in my hand, and said,
Hey, sweetheart, it's me.
"Mom, that
I'm
thing
just leaving
belongs
work
in a
now.
museum."
I love you so
Everyone
much,
laughed.
and I'll see you
I
very
laughed
soon.
too because mothers learn how to hide pain better than anyone. What Daniel didn't know was that inside my purse sat a thick envelope containing enough money to erase every dollar
How
he
am I going
owed
to
on
pay
his
for this?
house. He thought I
There is
was an
just no
old woman
way.
who couldn't afford a new phone. He never imagined that within a week the mortgage on his beautiful home would disappear, and the woman he was ashamed of would become the reason his family still had a roof over their heads. Before I tell you what happened, I'd love to hear from you. If this story touches your heart, please like and subscribe. And if you've ever felt overlooked by someone you love, leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes these stories easier to tell. I turned 68 the same spring my roses stopped blooming. The bushes were still there beside my porch in Toledo, Ohio, their branches stretching toward the sun as if they still believed something beautiful might happen. But the flowers never came. I remember standing there one chilly April morning with a cup of coffee in my hand, wondering if the soil had simply grown tired. Some days I felt the same way. My name is Angela Reyes, and for the first time in 42 years, I was living alone. My husband Miguel had died 3 years earlier. People tell you that grief gets easier with time. I suppose it changes shape, but easier isn't the word I would use. Grief becomes quieter. It moves into different rooms of the house. Sometimes it sits beside you at breakfast. Sometimes it waits for you in the garage. And sometimes it speaks through an old cell phone with a cracked screen. That phone sat on my kitchen table every morning. Daniel hated it. My son always said it made me look poor. The truth was, I could have replaced it 100 times. After Miguel passed away, I received his life insurance money. We had some savings. Miguel had always been careful with money, even when he worked long hours at the repair shop. We never lived extravagantly, but we lived wisely. Every paycheck had a purpose. "Save before you spend," he used to say. And I listened. I lived in the same small house we bought 36 years earlier. The furniture was old, but clean. The curtains had faded from years of sunlight. The kitchen cabinets creaked every time I opened them. Some people might have called the house outdated. I called it home. Every Sunday, I attended church. Every Tuesday, I volunteered at the local food pantry. I grew basil and tomatoes behind the garage. I clipped coupons. I repaired things instead of replacing them. None of those things happened because I was struggling. They happened because that was how Miguel and I had built our life. The old phone, however, was different. That phone contained Miguel, his voice, his laughter, the final voicemail he left me from the hospital. "Hey, Angie," he had said, "don't forget to eat dinner, and tell Danny I'm proud of him." I must have listened to those words 1,000 times. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit in the living room with the lights turned off and press play just to hear him breathe between sentences. Technology experts would probably tell me I could transfer everything to a new device. But they didn't understand. That phone had sat beside Miguel's hospital bed. His hands had touched it. His fingerprints once covered the screen. Keeping it felt like keeping one small piece of him alive. Daniel never understood that. My son lived nearly 2 hours away in a beautiful neighborhood outside Columbus. He was 43 years old, successful, well-dressed, and ambitious. He worked as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company. His wife, Megan, taught elementary school part-time. Their daughter, Lily, had just turned 10. They lived in a house far larger than the one where Daniel had grown up. Sometimes I looked at photographs Megan posted online. Large windows, white kitchen, stone fireplace, expensive furniture. Everything looked perfect, perhaps too perfect. Daniel used to call every Sunday. then every other Sunday, then once a month. Eventually, our conversations became short. Busy week, Mom. I'll call you later. Traveling for work. Everything's fine. Everything was always fine. At least that was what he said. I learned not to ask too many questions because Daniel had inherited Miguel's pride, but not always his humility. One afternoon, I was cleaning out a kitchen drawer when I found an old photograph. Daniel was 6 years old. Miguel had him sitting on the hood of our old truck while both of them held fishing poles. Daniel's smile was missing 2 front teeth. I remember that day. The fishing trip had been terrible. They caught nothing. The truck broke down. We ate cold sandwiches, and yet it became one of Daniel's favorite memories. I stared at the picture for several minutes. I wondered where that little boy had gone. The little boy who used to run into my bedroom during thunderstorms. The little boy who cried when his pet turtle died. The little boy who once saved his allowance for 3 months so he could buy me a Mother's Day bracelet from a drugstore. Life changes children. Success changes adults. Sometimes I feared that success had convinced Daniel that simplicity was something to escape. A week before his housewarming party, Megan called me. She didn't know I could hear the strain in her voice. She asked how I was feeling. She asked about my garden. She asked whether I needed anything. Then there was silence. Long enough for me to hear her breathing. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes," she answered quickly. "Everything's okay." But I knew women. I had spent 40 years hearing other mothers speak around their pain instead of through it. There was something in her voice. Fear. Exhaustion. Perhaps both. Before hanging up, she said something that stayed with me. "We're trying our best, Angela. Not we are doing well. Not everything is wonderful. Just, we're trying our best." That night, I opened the metal box I kept inside my bedroom closet. Inside were savings bonds, account statements, insurance papers, and documents Miguel and I had organized years ago. Miguel had always believed family came before money. If Daniel ever falls, he once told me, help him stand up. Just don't embarrass him while you're doing it. At the time, Daniel was 20 years old. Now he was 43. But some advice doesn't age. I sat on the edge of my bed holding those papers while the old phone rested beside me. I pressed play. Miguel's voice filled the room. "Tell Danny I'm proud of him." I closed my eyes. I wondered whether Miguel would still recognize our son. Or perhaps the better question was whether Daniel still recognized himself. Outside, the wind moved through the empty rose bushes. Inside, I folded the papers carefully and returned them to the box. Whatever troubles my son carried, he had not shared them with me. And yet, mothers have strange instincts. We notice the silence. We hear the pauses. We recognize the weight hidden behind the words, "I'm fine." A few days later, Daniel called. His voice sounded cheerful, too cheerful. "Mom, we're having a housewarming party next Saturday." For the first time in months, I smiled. "I'd love to come." There was a pause. "There'll be people from work," he said. "Some neighbors, too." "I understand." "And dress casual." "Well, nice casual." I looked down at my faded blue cardigan. "I'll look presentable." Another pause. Then he said, "Good." After we hung up, I sat quietly at my kitchen table. The old phone lay beside my coffee cup. For some reason, I reached over and touched it. I had no idea that before another week passed, my son would laugh at this phone in front of strangers. And I had no idea that the same phone carried memories worth far more than the house he was struggling so hard to keep. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel called while I was folding laundry in my bedroom. The television was playing softly in the living room, and rain tapped against the kitchen window. For a moment, seeing his name on my phone made me smile. My son rarely called during the middle of the week. Hey, Mom. His voice sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful. Hi, sweetheart. We're finally doing the housewarming party next Saturday. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Really? Yeah. Some people from work are coming. A few neighbors. Megan invited some friends. I'd love to come. There was a brief silence. Good, he said. Lily keeps asking when you're coming over. That made me smile. My granddaughter was the one person who never made me feel like I was visiting someone else's life. I've missed her. She misses you too. Another pause followed. This one felt different, uncomfortable. Mom, he finally said, it's pretty casual, but everybody will be dressed nicely. I looked down at the blue cardigan folded beside me. I understand. And there'll be people from my office. Daniel. I'm just saying. His voice softened slightly. I want everything to go well. I knew exactly what he meant. He didn't want me showing up carrying grocery bags, homemade casseroles, or wearing one of my old sweaters with loose threads. He didn't want his mother to look poor. The strange thing was that I wasn't poor at all. But Daniel had spent years confusing simplicity with failure. I'll look fine, I told him. Good. After we hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes. Rain continued falling outside. The house felt larger whenever a conversation with Daniel ended. Not because of what he said, because of everything he didn't say. He never asked how I was sleeping. He never asked whether my arthritis was bothering me. He never asked if I still listened to Miguel's old messages. Sometimes I wondered if grief made people uncomfortable because it reminded them that life could change at any moment. I walked into the kitchen and made myself tea. The old phone sat on the counter. Without thinking, I pressed play. Miguel's voice filled the room. Angie, if Danny ever gets too proud, don't fight him. Just remind him who he is. I laughed softly. You always knew him. The truth was that Miguel had understood our son better than anyone. Daniel had always wanted approval. As a child, he brought home perfect spelling tests. In high school, he worked 2 jobs. In college, he refused financial help whenever possible. He wanted to prove himself. There was nothing wrong with ambition. But somewhere along the way, ambition had become performance. Success had become appearance. I finished my tea and walked to my bedroom closet. Inside sat a metal lockbox. Miguel and I had kept important papers there for years. Insurance documents, savings certificates, investment statements. The box represented 40 years of sacrifice, skipped vacations, used cars, second jobs, homemade dinners. Every dollar had been saved because we believed family should always have a safety net. I opened the box. Inside was a folder. On the front, Miguel had written years earlier, for family if needed. My fingers rested on the papers. I still didn't know exactly what troubles Daniel faced. But something inside me felt uneasy. A mother learns to recognize invisible storms. The next morning, I went grocery shopping. At the market, I bought peaches. Lily loved peach cobbler. When she was 7, she had once eaten 3 pieces at Thanksgiving and whispered, "Don't tell Mommy." I smiled, remembering it. Back home, I baked the cobbler exactly the way Miguel liked it. Extra cinnamon, a little vanilla. The smell filled the kitchen. For a few hours, I felt peaceful. Then my phone rang. It was Megan. Hi, Angela. Hi, sweetheart. She sounded tired, very tired. Are you excited for Saturday? I am. Lily can't stop talking about it. I smiled. How are you doing? There was a pause. Oh, busy. The same answer Daniel always gave. But Megan wasn't as good at hiding things. I heard papers rustling, a drawer opening, someone sighing in the background. Then Daniel's voice, distant but sharp. Megan, where's the statement? The line became quiet. Megan returned. Sorry. Everything okay? Yes. She answered too quickly, again. I changed the subject. We spoke about Lily's school, summer vacation, the weather, ordinary things. But before hanging up, Megan said something strange. Angela. Yes. If you ever need anything at all, please tell us. The words sounded backward, almost as if she wanted to ask me for something but couldn't. After the call ended, I stood by the kitchen sink, staring outside. Miguel's wind chime moved gently on the porch. I suddenly remembered a conversation from nearly 6 months earlier. Megan had called to ask for my peach cobbler recipe. While searching for a pen, she had accidentally said, "We just need to make it through this year." At the time, I didn't ask questions. Now I wondered what she had meant. That evening, I drove to the cemetery. Miguel's grave sat beneath an old oak tree. I visited every few weeks. The grass had recently been cut. Fresh flowers rested nearby. I sat beside the headstone. Your son is struggling. The wind moved through the trees. I don't know what's happening yet. I looked down, but something isn't right. Miguel used to say that money problems make people act like strangers. They hide. They lie. They smile too much. They become afraid of being seen. Daniel had been smiling too much lately. On Friday afternoon, the day before the party, I finally opened the family folder. I reviewed the accounts, the savings, the certificates, the investment Miguel and I had left untouched. The numbers were still there. More than enough. My hands trembled slightly, not because of the money, because of the decision. Helping your child when they're 5 years old is easy. Helping them when they're 43 is much harder. Adults don't always accept help. Pride gets involved. Ego. Embarrassment. I pulled out a large envelope. Inside, I placed several documents. Account information, notes, contact numbers, information I might need. I wasn't certain what I planned to do. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. I slipped the envelope into my purse. Saturday morning arrived bright and warm. I woke up early. I curled my hair. I ironed my navy blue dress. I polished my old shoes. I packed the peach cobbler. Before leaving, I stood in front of the mirror. An older woman looked back at me. Gray hair, soft wrinkles, tired eyes. But there was also strength there. 42 years of marriage. 3 years of widowhood. A lifetime of motherhood. I picked up my old phone. The screen flickered slightly. Miguel's photograph appeared. His smile, his eyes, his face. Help me today, I whispered. Then I placed the phone in my purse beside the envelope. I didn't know that before the day ended, one of those items would be laughed at, and the other would quietly change my son's life forever. The drive from Toledo to Daniel's house took almost 2 hours. I left early. Much earlier than necessary. Older people do that. We leave early because we've spent enough years worrying about traffic, flat tires, weather-forgotten gifts, and unexpected delays. We learn that being early is easier than rushing. The peach cobbler sat carefully beside me in the passenger seat. My purse rested on the floor. Inside it was the envelope, and beside the envelope was my old phone. The entire drive I kept thinking about Miguel. He had never cared about appearances. Our first car had rust on both doors. Our honeymoon was 3 days at a small lake cabin because that was all we could afford. When Daniel was little, Miguel repaired bicycles for neighborhood children for free. He used to say, "People remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you own." I wondered what he would think of our son now. About 30 minutes before I arrived, my phone rang. It was Lily. Grandma? Her voice instantly made me smile. Hello, sweetheart. Are you close? About half an hour. She lowered her voice dramatically. I saved you a piece of cake. I laughed. Already? Dad bought one from a bakery. And you're saving me the chocolate part. You're my favorite person today. She giggled. Hurry! After we hung up, I felt lighter. No matter how complicated adults become, children still know how to love honestly. When I finally turned into Daniel's neighborhood, I slowed down. The homes were beautiful. Large brick houses, perfect lawns, fresh landscaping, new cars parked in wide driveways. Everything looked polished, almost too polished. Daniel's house stood near the end of a quiet street. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling. Stone columns framed the entrance. A black SUV sat in the driveway. Another vehicle was parked beside it. As I pulled up, I sat quietly for a moment. I remembered the small apartment where Daniel and Megan had started their marriage. I remembered helping them paint Lily's nursery. I remembered Daniel worrying about every dollar. Now he lived in a house larger than the one Miguel and I had ever dreamed of owning. Part of me felt proud. Another part felt uneasy. Before I could reach the front door, it opened. Lily came running. Grandma! She threw her arms around me. I nearly dropped the cobbler. There she is. She squeezed me tightly. For a moment, all the loneliness of the past several months disappeared. Megan followed behind her. She looked beautiful but tired. The kind of tired that makeup cannot hide. Angela. She hugged me warmly. I'm so glad you're here. You look exhausted. She laughed softly. I feel exhausted. Her eyes quickly moved toward the house. Daniel's inside with everyone. I nodded. How many people? More than he expected. That answer seemed to carry more meaning than the words themselves. As we entered the house, the noise immediately surrounded me. Music, laughter, glasses clinking, conversations. The house was impressive. The ceilings seemed twice as high as mine. The kitchen was bright white with marble countertops. A stone fireplace dominated the living room. Large windows overlooked the backyard. Everything looked expensive. And somehow, everything also felt cold. I spotted Daniel across the room. He wore a blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. A glass of wine rested in one hand. He was speaking with two men and a woman. When he saw me, he smiled. But it was the kind of smile people wear at business meetings. Mom. He hugged me quickly. You made it. Of course. His eyes moved to the peach cobbler. You brought food. I know Lily likes it. Right. He glanced toward his guests. Come meet some people. He guided me toward the group. This is my mom, Angela. The introductions happened quickly. Mark Ellison, Karen Whitmore, another couple whose names disappeared from my memory almost immediately. Daniel talks about you, Karen said politely. I smiled. Only the good things, I hope. Everyone laughed, but Daniel had already turned back toward the conversation. Interest rates, housing values, company sales numbers, vacation properties, topics I couldn't contribute to. I stood quietly, holding my purse. Eventually, Megan took the cobbler into the kitchen. Lily stayed beside me. She seemed to sense my discomfort. Want to see my room? Absolutely. Upstairs, her bedroom was beautiful. Soft blue walls, bookshelves, family photographs, a small desk by the window. She showed me her drawings, her school awards, her stuffed animals. Children always reveal what adults hide, and what Lily revealed was happiness. She loved this house. She loved her room. She loved feeling safe. As we walked back downstairs, voices drifted from the kitchen. I heard Daniel speaking. "Mortgage rates are insane right now." Someone laughed. Another voice said, "At least you locked yours in." There was a pause. Then Daniel answered, "Yeah." Only one word, but something about it felt strange. Later, while helping Megan arrange plates, I noticed an envelope lying partially hidden beside the coffee maker. A bank logo sat in the corner. Megan quickly picked it up. Almost too quickly. Her hand trembled slightly. "You okay?" I asked. She forced a smile. "Just busy." I nodded. Again, people sometimes answer questions with lies because they think the truth will burden others. The afternoon continued. More guests arrived. Music grew louder. Daniel seemed increasingly determined to impress everyone. He spoke about promotions, investments, school districts, future plans. Sometimes he sounded like my son. Sometimes he sounded like a salesman giving a presentation. I sat beside the fireplace with Lily. She colored pictures while I watched people move through the house. Mark asked Daniel about refinancing. Daniel changed the subject. Karen mentioned property taxes. Daniel laughed too loudly. Megan checked her phone several times. Something wasn't right. Not yet obvious. Not yet visible. But present. Like a crack hidden beneath fresh paint. As evening approached, guests gathered in the living room. Someone suggested taking photographs. People positioned themselves near the large windows. Children ran through the room. Wine glasses reflected the sunlight. Lily ran toward me. "Grandma, take our picture." I smiled. Of course. I reached into my purse. My fingers touched the old phone. The cracked screen. The worn edges. Miguel's phone. My phone. The phone that carried 40 years of memories. I didn't know that in just a few seconds that small device would become the center of the room, and my son's laughter would change everything. Lily stood beside the window with the evening sunlight falling across her face. The golden light touched her hair and made her smile seem even brighter. Behind her, the large glass windows reflected the living room, the guests, the wine glasses, and the expensive furniture. For a moment, she reminded me of Daniel when he was 10. The same smile, the same bright eyes, the same innocence. "Grandma, take the picture," she said. Several people turned toward us. Megan smiled. "That's a beautiful spot." I reached into my purse. My fingers found the familiar shape of my old phone. The screen had a small crack in the lower corner. The protective case had faded years earlier. One of the buttons occasionally stuck if pressed too hard. I pressed the power button. The screen lit slowly. It always took a few extra seconds. Before I could raise the phone, Daniel noticed it. At first, he simply stared. Then he laughed. Not a small laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. A loud laugh. "Oh my God, Mom." Several people looked toward him. He pointed at the phone. "You're seriously still using that thing?" I froze. A few guests smiled politely. Daniel shook his head. "That phone belongs in a museum." Mark Ellison laughed immediately. "No way." Daniel walked closer. "I swear I think this phone is older than Lily." More laughter. Karen Whitmore smiled awkwardly. "Oh, come on," Daniel continued. "Mom, we're going to have to get you into this century." Someone near the kitchen chuckled. I could feel heat rising into my face. Lily looked confused. I attempted to smile. Mothers become experts at smiling when their hearts hurt. "I like it," I said quietly. Daniel laughed again. "You like it because you don't know how to use anything newer." The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make me feel very small. The old phone suddenly felt heavy in my hand. I looked down at the cracked screen. Miguel's picture still sat on the background. My husband, my partner, the man who had worked double shifts to put Daniel through college, the man whose final voice messages still lived inside that phone, and now our son was using it as a joke. Mark stepped forward. "You should get her one of those new smartphones." Daniel raised his glass. "Trust me, I've tried." He looked at me again. "Mom refuses to join modern civilization." More laughter. I heard Megan say quietly, "Daniel?" But he didn't stop. "I'm surprised it doesn't have one of those rotary dials." This time, several people laughed louder. I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not exactly, something softer, something older, a disappointment that had been growing for years. Lily looked at me. She wasn't laughing. Her little face had become serious. "Grandma?" I forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart." But it wasn't. The room gradually returned to its conversations. Daniel walked back toward his guests. The moment had passed for everyone else. For me, it had only begun. I slowly lowered the phone. The photograph of Lily was never taken. My fingers trembled slightly. I slipped the phone back into my purse. Inside that same purse sat the envelope containing information that could change Daniel's entire life. The envelope containing enough money to eliminate the mortgage that was slowly crushing him. Only a few hours earlier, I had imagined pulling Daniel aside after the party. I had imagined saying, "Son, if you need help, your father and I prepared for that." I had imagined relief, gratitude, perhaps tears. Instead, I stood in his beautiful living room while he used my husband's final belongings as entertainment. Megan approached me quietly. "Angela, are you okay?" I nodded. "I'm fine." It was a lie. The same lie Daniel had been telling me for months. Lily took my hand. "Can we still take the picture later?" "Of course." She squeezed my fingers. Children often recognize pain before adults do. Daniel returned to the conversation with his coworkers. I heard him discussing interest rates, bonuses, housing values, the very things he wanted everyone to admire. But now I noticed something different. Every time someone mentioned money, his smile tightened. Every time someone discussed mortgages, he changed the subject. Every time Megan entered the room, he seemed irritated. Something was wrong, and yet he still found time to laugh at his mother. I excused myself and walked toward the kitchen. The house suddenly felt too warm. The laughter still echoed inside my ears. I poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking. As I stood there, I remembered another day. Daniel was 12 years old. He had come home crying because boys at school mocked his shoes. We couldn't afford the expensive brands. Miguel sat beside him that evening. He told him, "Never make another person feel small so you can feel big." Daniel had nodded. He had cried. He had promised. Standing in that kitchen 25 years later, I wondered what had happened to that boy. The back door was slightly open. Cool evening air drifted inside. I stepped outside onto the patio. The sounds from the party became softer. Birds moved through nearby trees. Somewhere, a lawn sprinkler was running. I sat alone. Inside my purse, my fingers touched the envelope. For several seconds, I considered walking back into the house. I imagined calling Daniel into the kitchen. I imagined placing the documents in his hands. I imagined saying, "The woman you just embarrassed can save your house." But another voice stopped me. Miguel's voice. Pride. "Don't embarrass him. Help him stand. Not today. Not like this." The sliding door opened. Lily stepped outside. She climbed into the chair beside me. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, she asked softly, "Did Daddy hurt your feelings?" Children always ask the question adults avoid. I looked at her. Her eyes were full of concern. I smiled gently. "Your daddy has a lot on his mind. But you looked sad." I took her hand. Sometimes grown-ups say things they don't mean. She thought about that. I don't think Grandpa would laugh. My throat tightened. "No," I whispered. "I don't think he would." Inside the house, I heard Daniel laughing again. The same laugh, the same voice, but now it sounded different. Less like happiness, more like someone trying very hard to convince everyone that his life was perfect. Lily leaned her head against my shoulder. I looked through the large windows. My son stood in the center of the room, successful, confident, admired. And yet, for the first time all evening, I realized something. The richest person in that house was not Daniel. The strongest person was not Daniel. And before this night was over, I would hear something that would change everything I believed about my son's beautiful new life. The evening air felt cooler than it had only a few minutes earlier. Lily sat beside me on the patio swing while laughter drifted from inside the house. The music had become louder. Glasses clinked. Someone turned on outdoor lights along the backyard fence. Inside, the party continued. Outside, a 10-year-old girl quietly watched her grandmother. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you really okay?" Children ask questions that adults spend years avoiding. I looked toward the large windows. Daniel stood near the kitchen island talking to Mark and Karen. His hands moved as he spoke. He laughed again. The sound reached the patio. Lily looked down at her shoes. He shouldn't have laughed. I took a slow breath. Your father didn't mean to hurt me. She looked up. But he did. I didn't answer, because she was right. After a few moments, she pointed toward my purse. Can I see your phone? I smiled slightly. You want to see the ancient artifact? She giggled. Dad says it's ancient. I reached into my purse and handed it to her. She turned it over carefully. The protective case had become faded over the years. The corners were worn smooth from thousands of days inside my handbag. It doesn't look bad. It has lived a long life. She pressed the home button. The screen slowly lit. Miguel's photograph appeared, a picture taken at a county fair nearly 15 years earlier. Lily studied the image. Grandpa? Yes. He looks nice. He was. She continued looking through the photographs. The phone held decades of memories. Daniel at 6 years old holding his first fish. Daniel graduating high school. Christmas mornings. Birthday cakes. Family vacations. Miguel grilling hamburgers. Miguel teaching Daniel how to drive. Lily smiled. Daddy was so little. He was. He had curly hair. I laughed. He certainly did. She continued scrolling. Suddenly she stopped. Can we hear Grandpa? I felt my throat tighten. For a moment, I hesitated. Those recordings belonged to me, to my grief, to my loneliness. But Lily had his eyes. Perhaps she deserved to know him. I opened the voicemail folder. There were only a few messages. The hospital stay had been difficult. Miguel became weaker quickly. The final messages had become treasures. I pressed play. The speaker crackled softly. Then his voice appeared. Hey, Angie. The sound immediately transported me 3 years backward. I know you're probably worrying. Don't worry. Lily became very still. Tell Danny I'm proud of him. I closed my eyes. And tell my little Lily that Grandpa loves her. The recording ended. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Lily's eyes looked wet. That's his real voice. Yes. He sounds kind. He was. She looked down at the phone. You keep him in here. The words nearly broke my heart. Children understand things adults complicate. Yes, I whispered. I do. She held the phone carefully. It's not old. I smiled. No. She shook her head. It keeps people. I looked at her. At that moment, a 10-year-old girl understood something that her father no longer understood. The sliding door opened. Voices drifted outside. Megan, Daniel. They hadn't seen us. They stood inside the kitchen. The curtain partly blocked their view of the patio. Their voices were low, but not low enough. Megan spoke first. We can't keep doing this. Daniel sounded irritated. Not now. When Daniel... After everyone leaves. We don't have time. My hand tightened around the edge of the swing. Lily looked toward the kitchen. I gently touched her shoulder. Neither of us moved. Megan's voice sounded strained. The payment is already late. My heart stopped. Daniel answered immediately. Lower your voice. I'm tired of pretending. We're fine. No, we're not. Silence. Then Megan spoke again. What happens next month? Daniel did not answer. I heard a drawer open. Paper rustled. The bank keeps calling. Daniel sighed heavily. We'll figure it out. How? No answer. Lily looked at me. She didn't fully understand, but children recognize fear. I don't want your mother finding out, Daniel finally said. Megan answered quietly. Why? Because. She's your mother. Daniel's voice became sharper. I'm not taking money from my mother. Megan lowered her voice. Nobody said anything about money. I know exactly what she'd do. I felt my chest tighten. Megan spoke again. Angela loves you. I know. Then why are you ashamed to let her help? Several seconds passed. Then Daniel said words I would remember forever. I'm not accepting charity from someone who still uses a broken phone. The kitchen became silent. Inside me, something became silent too. Lily looked confused. She couldn't understand every word. But she understood enough. She looked at me. I forced myself to smile. The conversation continued quietly inside. I no longer heard every sentence. Only fragments. Mortgage. Interest rates. Bills. Refinancing. Another payment. Each word answered questions I had carried for months. The perfect house. The forced smiles. The tension. The phone calls. The exhaustion in Megan's voice. The large windows. The expensive furniture. The beautiful neighborhood. All of it rested on a foundation that was beginning to crack. And Daniel was terrified. Suddenly, the kitchen door opened. Megan stepped outside. She looked surprised to see us. There you are. Lily quickly handed me the phone. We were listening to Grandpa. Megan's face softened. Oh. She sat beside us. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Lily said quietly, Grandpa said he's proud of Daddy. Megan looked away. The tears appeared quickly. She wiped them before Lily noticed. He always was. Lily smiled. I think Grandpa would like this house. Megan nodded. I think he would too. I looked at her carefully. Her eyes looked exhausted. She had been carrying fear for a long time. Perhaps alone. She stood. I should get back inside. Before leaving, she touched my shoulder, very gently. The gesture felt almost like an apology, or perhaps a request. When she disappeared inside, Lily leaned against me. Grandma. Yes? Is Daddy in trouble? I looked through the windows. Daniel stood alone now. His smile had disappeared. He stared down at his phone. For the first time all evening, he looked tired. Very tired. Sometimes grown-ups get scared. I said, Can you help him? The question settled heavily between us. Could I? Yes. Would I? I didn't know. Inside my purse sat the envelope. Inside my purse sat enough money to save the house. Enough money to erase the fear. Enough money to protect Lily. But Daniel had laughed at me. He had laughed at Miguel. He had laughed at memories. He had laughed at the very phone that still carried his father's voice. The night air became colder. Inside the house, the party slowly continued. Outside, beside my granddaughter, I realized something. My son wasn't simply arrogant, he was drowning. And drowning people often push away the very hands trying to save them. The party began to thin out around 9 o'clock. Cars slowly disappeared from the driveway. Wine glasses sat half empty on tables. The music became quieter. Conversations lost their energy. People hugged goodbye and thanked Daniel and Megan for the evening. From the patio, I watched guests leave through the front windows. Karen Whitmore embraced Megan. Mark Ellison shook Daniel's hand. Everyone complimented the beautiful house. Everyone admired the neighborhood. Everyone left believing my son was living the perfect life. Perhaps Daniel wanted them to. Perhaps he needed them to. Lily had gone upstairs to change into her pajamas. Megan was helping her brush her teeth. Daniel walked several guests to the door. I remained outside alone. The envelope still rested inside my purse. The old phone rested beside it. 2 things. One held memories. The other held salvation. And my son knew the value of neither. Eventually, I stood up. The evening air had grown colder, and my knees had begun to ache. I stepped quietly back into the house. The kitchen lights were still bright. The living room had become quieter. I could hear water running upstairs. I assumed Megan was helping Lily. I wanted a glass of water before telling Daniel that I should probably drive home. As I approached the kitchen, voices stopped me. Daniel? Megan. The kitchen doorway stood partially open. Neither of them could see me. For several seconds, I considered making noise, clearing my throat, walking in, announcing myself. Instead, I stood still. Megan spoke first. We can't keep pretending. Daniel sighed. We've already talked about this. No, you've talked about it. I listen. His voice became sharper. Not tonight. Then when? She placed something heavily on the counter. Paper, bills, statements. I could hear them. The mortgage payment is late again. My stomach tightened. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Megan continued. We missed last month. We were only short. Daniel, we're still short. He lowered his voice. My bonus comes next month. You said that 3 months ago. Silence. The refrigerator hummed quietly. Outside, a car drove away. Inside the kitchen, my son's life was falling apart. We'll refinance. We tried. We'll sell investments. We already did. I closed my eyes. The beautiful house, the expensive furniture, the perfect neighborhood. Everything suddenly looked different. Megan spoke again. The bank called twice this week. I know. They sent another notice. I know. Her voice trembled. I'm scared. Daniel didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded tired. Not angry, not proud, simply tired. I don't know what else to do. Those words hurt me, because they sounded like the little boy who used to ask me for help. But then pride returned. We're not telling my mother. Megan inhaled sharply. Why not? Because she's family. Exactly. Angela would help. His answer came immediately. I don't need help. You do? No. Megan's voice softened. Daniel, nobody is judging you. I am. The words hung in the air. For the first time that evening, I heard fear inside my son's voice. Not embarrassment, not arrogance. Fear. Real fear. Megan sat down. I could hear the chair move. Lily hears us fighting. I know. She asked me if we're losing the house. My heart broke. Daniel spoke quietly. We're not losing the house. How do you know? He didn't answer. Megan continued. We can't keep buying things we can't afford. We had to. No, we didn't. I had responsibilities. To who? Silence. Then she answered her own question. Your co-workers. He didn't respond. Your neighbors. Nothing. The people at this party. Daniel finally spoke. You don't understand. No. Help me understand. He took a long breath. I spent my whole life trying not to become the poor kid. The words surprised me. Poor Daniel had never been poor. We had struggled at times. We had budgeted carefully. We had bought used cars. But he had never gone hungry. He had never lacked love. Megan answered softly. You weren't poor. You didn't see it? What? The clothes. The apartment. The old truck. I leaned against the wall. Suddenly, I understood. Daniel had spent years being embarrassed by things that Miguel and I had never been ashamed of. We did our best, Megan said. My parents did their best too. His voice became bitter. And my mother still carries that broken phone around. The word struck me again. Even now. Even after everything. Megan spoke carefully. That phone isn't the problem. It represents everything. What does that mean? Daniel laughed softly. Look at my mother. My chest tightened. She lives in the same house, same furniture, same clothes, same phone. She's happy. No, she's stuck. I felt tears begin to gather. Megan answered quietly. No, Daniel, I think she's at peace. He didn't answer. She continued. Your mother isn't ashamed of who she is. He still said nothing. And maybe that's why you can't understand her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Megan said the words that changed everything. If we don't catch up, the bank can start proceedings. My breath caught. Foreclosure. The word wasn't spoken, but it lived there, between them. Daniel's voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. I know. What are we going to do? He whispered. I don't know. I felt tears in my eyes, not because my son needed money, because my son was drowning. And he had chosen pride over truth. He had chosen appearances over peace. He had laughed at his mother while silently carrying fear inside his own chest. I finally stepped backward, quietly, slowly. They never knew I had been there. I returned to the living room. The fireplace glowed softly. Family photographs decorated the shelves. One picture showed Daniel holding Lily at the beach. Another showed Daniel and Megan on their wedding day. I looked at those photographs. I looked at my son through those memories. And suddenly, I no longer felt angry. Hurt, yes, deeply. But anger had begun to disappear. In its place came something far more dangerous for a mother: compassion. Because no matter how old our children become, part of us still remembers them as frightened little boys. A few minutes later, Daniel entered the living room. His face looked tired. He forced a smile. You okay, Mom? I looked at him, at the expensive shirt, the expensive watch, the exhausted eyes. I'm fine. He nodded. You heading home soon? Probably. He looked relieved. Perhaps he thought I hadn't noticed anything. Perhaps he believed his secrets remained hidden. But I knew. The mortgage, the debt, the fear, the bank, the possibility of losing everything. And suddenly, the envelope inside my purse felt much heavier. The money could save him, but could it save the man he had become? That question stayed with me as I looked at my son standing inside his beautiful house. The house he might lose. The house I could save. The house he had insulted his mother inside only a few hours earlier. And for the first time that evening, I realized I had a decision to make. By the time the last guest left the house had become quiet. The silence felt strange after several hours of laughter music and forced conversations. Empty glasses sat on tables. Used napkins rested beside dessert plates. The expensive candles Megan had lit earlier were burning low. Daniel stood near the front window watching the final car pull away. Megan gathered dishes. Lily had fallen asleep upstairs, and I sat in the living room holding my purse. Inside that purse were two things: an old phone and an envelope. One carried memories. The other carried answers. For several minutes, nobody spoke. The evening had exhausted all of us. Finally, I stood. I should head home. Megan immediately looked up. So soon? It's getting late. Daniel glanced at the clock. Yeah, it's almost 10. Not stay longer? Not let me walk you out. Just a statement. Megan wiped her hands. At least let me pack some dessert. I smiled. You keep it for Lily. She looked disappointed. Perhaps she wanted me to stay. Perhaps she wanted me to say something. Perhaps she knew I had heard more than I should have. Daniel picked up my empty baking dish. The cobbler was good. It was the first compliment he had given me all evening. Thank you. He nodded awkwardly. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Maybe about the phone. Maybe about the joke. Maybe about making me feel small in front of strangers. But he didn't. Instead, he said, You really should let me buy you a new phone. The words landed differently now. Hours earlier, they had embarrassed me. Now they simply made me sad. I looked at him, at the man standing inside a beautiful house he could barely afford, at the man drowning in debt while worrying about his mother's phone. I like my phone, he sighed. Mom, it works. It's falling apart. So are some other things. The words escaped before I could stop them. Daniel frowned slightly. What does that mean? I smiled. Nothing. He looked confused. Megan looked nervous. Nobody spoke. Finally, I picked up my purse. I really should go. Megan walked me toward the front door. Daniel followed behind us. The cool night air entered as the door opened. The neighborhood looked peaceful. Porch lights glowed. Trees moved gently in the wind. Everything appeared stable, safe. But I knew better now. Megan hugged me tightly, longer than usual. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. She hesitated. Please drive carefully. I nodded. Daniel stood beside her, hands in his pockets, tired, quiet. For just a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be. The boy who cried when he lost his baseball glove. The boy who once slept beside our bed after nightmares. The boy who needed his parents. I almost reached into my purse. I almost pulled out the envelope. I almost said, Daniel, sit down. We need to talk. I almost told him that his father and I had prepared for difficult days. That money existed. That help was available. That he wasn't alone. But then I remembered the laughter, the guests, the phone, the words. I'm not taking charity from someone who still uses a broken phone. I realized something. If I handed him the envelope tonight, he wouldn't see love. He would see rescue. He would see humiliation. He would see proof that he had failed. And Daniel was not yet ready for that. Good night, Mom, he said. I looked into his eyes. He seemed older than 43. Fear does that. Good night, Daniel. He surprised me then. Very briefly, he hugged me. The embrace lasted only a few seconds. But I felt something. Not apology. Not yet. Exhaustion. As I walked toward my car, I heard Megan softly say, Call her. Daniel answered quietly, I will. But I knew he wouldn't. Not tonight. I climbed into the driver's seat. The house stood behind me. Beautiful, expensive, fragile. I placed my purse on the passenger seat. The envelope remained inside, untouched, unused. I started the engine. The headlights illuminated the driveway. Daniel and Megan stood together beneath the porch light. Two people carrying a burden neither could lift alone. I waved. They waved back. Then I drove away. The neighborhood disappeared slowly behind me. For several miles I said nothing. The road stretched ahead. Dark fields, occasional headlights. Small towns sleeping in the distance. Finally, I pulled into a gas station. Not because I needed gas, because I needed to breathe. I parked beneath a light. The car became silent. My hands rested on the steering wheel. Then I opened my purse. The envelope sat there, thick, heavy. Inside were account statements, investment documents, information Robert Thompson at the bank had helped us organize years earlier. Enough money, more than enough. I carefully opened the flap. My fingers touched the papers. Miguel's handwriting appeared on one document. Family first. He had written those words many years ago. Suddenly, tears came. Not because of the money, not because of Daniel, because I missed my husband. I missed having someone beside me to say, What should we do? The old phone rested beside the envelope. I picked it up. The battery was low. The screen flickered. Miguel's photograph appeared. I opened the voicemail folder. His voice filled the quiet car. Hey, Angie. I closed my eyes. If you're listening to this, you're probably worrying. I laughed softly through my tears. You always knew me. His voice continued. Things usually work out. I listened to the message twice, then 3 times. Outside, a truck pulled into the gas station. Inside my car, 39 years of marriage sat beside me. The phone, the memories, the advice, the love. I suddenly understood something. Miguel would help Daniel, not because Daniel deserved it, not because Daniel had behaved well, but because Lily deserved security, because Megan deserved peace, because family meant helping people even when they disappointed you. I looked at the envelope again. I thought about the small piece of land Miguel and I still owned near the lake. We had dreamed about retiring there, a tiny cabin, 2 rocking chairs, coffee every morning overlooking the water. After Miguel died, I kept the land because it felt like keeping our dream alive. But dreams change, people change, life changes. And sometimes love asks us to let go of one future to protect another. I put the envelope back into my purse. I started the car. As I drove through the darkness toward Toledo, my decision slowly became clear. I would not give Daniel the money. I would not hand him the envelope. I would not stand in his kitchen and rescue him. Instead, I would go to the bank. I would speak to Robert Thompson. I would find out exactly what could be done. And if I could save that house, I would do it quietly. Not for Daniel's pride, not for gratitude, not for recognition, for Lily, for Megan, for the little boy Daniel once was. The old phone lay beside me in the passenger seat. Miguel's voice still echoed in my mind. Outside, the highway stretched endlessly ahead. Inside my heart, the decision had already been made. My son had laughed at my old phone, but before he understood what that phone truly meant, the woman he had embarrassed would quietly save the home he was desperately trying not to lose. I slept very little that night. When I finally reached Toledo, the clock on my stove read nearly 1 a.m. The house was dark and quiet. For several minutes, I sat inside my car with the engine turned off. The envelope remained beside me. The old phone rested on top of it. Neither one had left my side. Inside the house, I turned on only the kitchen light. The familiar room felt smaller than usual. The old wooden table, the faded curtains, Miguel's coffee mug still sitting on the shelf. Everything looked exactly the same, yet something inside me had changed. I made tea. I sat alone, and I thought about my son. Daniel had embarrassed me. That was true. He had laughed at me. That was true too. But beneath the pride, beneath the expensive clothes, and the large house I had seen fear, real fear. The kind that keeps people awake at night. The kind that makes them speak harshly to the people who love them. The kind that convinces them they must carry everything alone. Around 2 o'clock, I finally walked into the bedroom. Miguel's photograph sat beside the bed. I picked it up. "What would you do?" I whispered. Of course, photographs never answer, but memories do. I remembered one winter, nearly 20 years earlier. Daniel had broken his arm playing basketball. The hospital bills worried us. Money was tight. I sat at this very same kitchen table crying over expenses. Miguel had placed his hand over mine. "We'll figure it out." How? He hadn't known. But somehow we had. Because we faced problems together. Daniel, however, had decided to face his alone. The next morning I woke before sunrise. The sky outside my window still looked gray. I made coffee. I listened to Miguel's voicemail one more time. Then I picked up the telephone. Robert Thompson answered on the 3rd ring. He had worked at First National Bank for nearly 30 years. He and Miguel had known each other since high school. After Miguel died, Robert attended the funeral. Angela? Good morning, Robert. His voice sounded surprised. You don't usually call this early. No. Everything all right? I looked out the kitchen window. The roses still hadn't bloomed. No, I said honestly. Not really. He became quiet. Do you want to come in? Please. What time? As soon as possible. 10 o'clock. I'll be there. The bank sat downtown in an old brick building. I arrived 15 minutes early. Older people do that. We arrive early because life has taught us that important conversations deserve extra time. Robert greeted me personally. His hair had become completely gray over the years. His glasses rested low on his nose. When he saw me, his expression immediately changed. Angela. He hugged me gently. How are you? I almost answered the way everyone answers. Fine, but I was tired of that word. I'm worried. He nodded. Come into my office. His office had changed very little. Family photographs, framed certificates, a baseball signed by his grandson, and one picture of Robert and Miguel fishing together 20 years earlier. Seeing Miguel's face made my chest tighten. Robert noticed. I still miss him. So do I. For a few moments, we simply sat quietly. Then he folded his hands. What can I do for you? I placed the envelope on his desk. I need information. He opened it. The account statements, the investment papers, the savings records. His eyes moved carefully over the pages. After several minutes, he looked up. You've kept everything. Miguel insisted. Robert smiled. He usually insisted correctly. I took a breath. My son is in trouble. Robert waited. He doesn't know I know. Financial trouble. I nodded. Mortgage. Robert leaned back in his chair. How serious? I don't know exactly. But serious enough. Yes. He remained silent for a moment. Then he asked, Does Daniel know you're here? No. Would he approve? I laughed softly. Absolutely not. Robert looked at the papers again. You have enough. I know. But enough for what? He understood immediately. You want to pay the mortgage. The words sounded strange, spoken aloud. I want to save my granddaughter's home. He removed his glasses. Angela, that's a very large decision. I know. You've spent years protecting these savings. I know. You and Miguel had plans. The lake, the cabin, the retirement we had imagined. I nodded slowly. I know. Robert was quiet. Then he asked the question nobody else could ask. Are you doing this because you feel guilty? No. Because Daniel asked? No. Because you're afraid he'll stop loving you? I shook my head. No. He studied me carefully. Then why? I looked down at my hands because my son is afraid. Because my granddaughter deserves stability. Because my husband would help him. Because mothers do impossible things. Because he's still my child. Robert nodded. He understood. He had children himself. He opened a file drawer. If you decide to do this, there are ways. My heart beat faster. Tell me. He explained the process. Mortgage payoff, verification, outstanding balance, legal documentation, privacy protections. The details felt overwhelming. At one point, he stopped speaking. You realize he may not react the way you hope. I know. He may feel embarrassed. I know. He may even become angry. That possibility had not occurred to me. Angry. Robert nodded. People who receive help sometimes feel exposed. I thought about Daniel standing in his expensive kitchen. The laughter, the pride, the fear. He's his father's son. Robert smiled gently. No. I looked up. He has his father's pride. Robert folded his hands. But Miguel always knew when to ask for help. I looked toward the window. Snow had begun to fall lightly outside. Very early snow, almost winter. What if he hates me for it? Robert answered quietly. What if he thanks you 20 years from now? The room became silent. Finally, I reached into my purse. I removed another envelope. Inside was paperwork connected to the small lake property, the land Miguel and I had saved for retirement. Robert stared. Angela. I know. You don't have to sell it. I looked at the papers. The cabin we would never build. The mornings we would never share. The rocking chairs that would remain imaginary forever. I think I do. My voice trembled. Robert spoke softly. Miguel loved that place. So did I. Then why? I felt tears fill my eyes. Because Lily loves her bedroom. The room became completely silent. Robert looked down. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he nodded. All right. He reached for the paperwork. We'll see what can be done. As he began organizing documents, I looked at the photograph on his shelf. Miguel and Robert holding fish beside a lake, both smiling, both young. I touched the old phone inside my purse. For the first time since the party, I felt peaceful. Not because the decision was easy, because it was made. And somewhere I believed Miguel already knew. For the next several days, I told no one. Not Daniel, not Megan, not even my closest friend at church. Some decisions become fragile when spoken aloud. They need silence to grow stronger. Every morning, I made coffee. Every afternoon, I watered my roses. Every evening, I listened to one of Miguel's messages. And every day, I met with Robert. The process was more complicated than I expected. There were documents, signatures, property evaluations, investment transfers. The small lake property had to be listed. Several savings accounts needed to be reorganized. Robert handled most of the details. I simply sat in his office holding papers that represented 40 years of marriage. One afternoon, he removed his glasses. You can still change your mind. I looked at him. No. Even now. Even now. He nodded. I thought you might say that. The truth was that my mind had already moved beyond the money. This was no longer about Daniel. It was about Lily sleeping peacefully in her bedroom. It was about Megan not crying in the kitchen. It was about Miguel's belief that family mattered more than possessions. The lake property sold faster than expected. A retired couple from Cleveland bought it. When Robert called to tell me, I sat quietly in my living room for several minutes. The cabin would never be built. The porch overlooking the water would never exist. The rocking chairs would remain only in my imagination. I cried that evening, not because I regretted the decision, because I was saying goodbye to the final dream Miguel and I had shared together. The next Sunday, I attended church. After the service, several women invited me to lunch. I almost declined. Instead, I joined them. Life teaches older women something important. You must continue living, even while grieving. At the restaurant, my friend Eleanor asked about Daniel. How's your son? I smiled. Busy. She laughed. They're always busy. I nodded. No one knew that my son's life was quietly unraveling. No one knew that I was preparing to save his home. No one knew that my retirement plans were disappearing one signature at a time. And strangely, I preferred it that way. On Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Daniel. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. He rarely called during the week. I answered. Hello? Hey, Mom? His voice sounded tired, very tired. Hi, sweetheart. How are you? The question surprised me. I'm fine. There was a long pause. I wanted to thank you for coming. I said nothing. And for the cobbler. You're welcome. Another pause. Then, Lily keeps talking about Grandpa's voice. I looked at the old phone beside me. She liked hearing him. Yeah, his voice softened. I forgot those recordings were still on there. I never removed them. I guess not. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something unexpected. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. My heart stopped. The apology came quietly, almost reluctantly. I wasn't trying to. I looked out the kitchen window. The roses had finally begun to bloom. One small red flower had appeared that morning. Daniel. Yeah. Why does my phone bother you so much? Silence. Long silence. When he finally answered, his voice sounded different. I don't know. Yes, you do. Another pause. It reminds me. Of what? Our old house. Our old truck. The years when Dad worked all the time. I felt my chest tighten. Were you unhappy? No. Then what? He sighed. I spent years trying not to become that person. What person? The guy who worries about bills. The irony almost made me cry, because he had become exactly that man, only in a much larger house. I spoke softly. Your father worried about bills because he loved his family. He said nothing. And he never felt ashamed of our life. Daniel remained quiet. Finally, he whispered, I know. For the first time in years, we spoke honestly. Not long, not deeply, but honestly. Before hanging up, he said, I'll bring Lily to visit soon. I'd like that. After the call ended, I sat quietly. The apology had come. Small, incomplete, but real. Perhaps the little boy still existed after all. 2 days later, Robert called. We have the final numbers. My heart began beating faster. And it's enough. I closed my eyes. Enough. Such a simple word. Enough money. Enough time. Enough hope. Whenever you're ready. I wasn't ready. Not emotionally. Not yet. Because paying the mortgage meant crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. It meant changing Daniel's life without asking. It meant giving away the future Miguel and I had imagined. That night, I visited the cemetery. The air had become colder. Autumn leaves covered the grass. Miguel's headstone looked exactly as it always did. Simple, strong. I sat beside him. The property sold. The wind moved through the trees. I hope you're not angry. Tears appeared. I wanted that cabin too. I looked down, but Lily wants her bedroom. The silence around me felt peaceful, and for the first time since all of this had begun, I felt something strange. Not sadness, approval. Perhaps it was my imagination. Perhaps grief invents answers. But I could almost hear Miguel. Family first. The following morning, Megan called. Her voice sounded strained. Angela, what's wrong? She hesitated. Nothing. Megan. She began crying very quietly. I don't know what to do anymore. My heart broke. Tell me. The bank called again. I closed my eyes. The house. Yes. Does Daniel know? He was there. She took a shaky breath. He doesn't sleep. I said nothing. He sits in the kitchen at night. Another pause. I think he's terrified. I looked at the old phone. Miguel's photograph stared back at me. Megan? Yes. Everything is going to be okay. She started crying harder. How do you know? Because I had already sold my dream. Because the money was ready. Because Robert was waiting. Because a mother had quietly decided that her son's family would not lose their home. But I couldn't tell her that. Not yet. So instead I said, because families survive hard things. After we hung up, I looked around my little house. The old furniture, the faded curtains, the cracked phone, the same kitchen table. And suddenly, I understood something Daniel still hadn't learned. Security does not come from large houses. Peace does not come from expensive neighborhoods. And wealth is not measured by what you own. It is measured by what you are willing to give away. And very soon, my son was about to learn that lesson himself. 3 days later, the letter arrived. I did not see it. I was sitting at my kitchen table that morning, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when Robert called. It's finished. My hands became still. Everything. I closed my eyes. The words felt both heavy and strangely peaceful. The mortgage has been paid in full. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. 40 years of savings, the lake property, the plans Miguel and I had built together, gone, and yet I felt no regret, only sadness and relief. Robert spoke gently. The bank will send the official documents today. I nodded. Will they know? Eventually. Will they know it was me? He hesitated. I protected as much as possible. But there may be references to the family trust. I looked at Miguel's photograph. That's okay? After we ended the call, I sat quietly in my kitchen. The old phone lay beside my coffee cup. The same cracked screen. The same worn case. The same voice messages. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had changed. 2 hours away, my son's life was about to become very different. I spent the afternoon planting bulbs in the garden. The weather had become cooler. Leaves covered the yard. My knees hurt. My back hurt. But working with my hands calmed me. At nearly 4 o'clock, my phone rang. Megan. Her voice was shaking. Angela. I immediately stood. What's wrong? We got a letter. My heart began to pound. What kind of letter? From the bank. I remained silent. They said... Her voice broke. They said the mortgage has been paid. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, what did Daniel say? He thinks it's a mistake. I could almost picture him, standing in the kitchen, reading the letter again, trying to find the error. He called the bank. And they confirmed it. I closed my eyes. It's real. Yes. She lowered her voice. Angela, was it you? I looked at the old phone. Miguel's photograph looked back at me. I think you should talk to Daniel. She began crying. We're free. The words filled the room. We're free. Months of fear, months of bills, months of late-night arguments, months of pretending. Gone. Not because of a bonus, not because of success, not because of appearances, because someone loved them enough to sacrifice quietly. Megan whispered, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. After we hung up, I sat alone. I knew Daniel would call. He had to. But hours passed. Nothing. Evening arrived. Still nothing. Part of me wasn't surprised. Daniel had spent his entire adult life trying to stand alone, receiving help. Especially this kind of help would feel like failure. That night, while I was washing dishes, my phone finally rang. Daniel, I answered. Hello. His voice sounded strange, not angry, not emotional, almost numb. Mom. Yes? Did you pay off my mortgage? The question sat between us. I could hear him breathing. I could hear dishes in the background. Perhaps Megan was nearby. Perhaps Lily was listening upstairs. I answered honestly. Yes. Silence. Long silence. Finally, why? Such a simple question. Why? Not thank you. Not how. Not when. Why? I dried my hands with a towel. Because you needed help. We didn't ask. No. His voice became harder. You sold something, didn't you? My heart tightened. Daniel. The lake property. I didn't answer. His breathing changed. You sold it? Yes. Mom. The word sounded broken. You loved that place. So did your father. Why would you do that? I looked around my kitchen, at the old cabinets, the faded wallpaper, the small table. Because mothers do impossible things. Because granddaughters deserve bedrooms. Because fathers still speak through old phones. Because love rarely makes financial sense. But I said, because your family matters. He didn't speak. For nearly 20 seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he asked quietly, how much? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. No, Daniel, it doesn't. His voice cracked. I can't pay you back. I didn't ask you to. You should have told me. Would you have accepted it? Silence. The answer was obvious. No. Eventually he whispered, I don't know. I sat down. Yes, you do. Again, silence. Then he said something I never expected. I feel ashamed. My eyes filled with tears. Why? Because you saved me. No. You did. I protected my family. His voice became smaller. And I laughed at your phone. The words finally came. Not hidden, not avoided, spoken. I know. I was awful. I didn't answer, because the truth didn't need confirmation. I don't know why I did that. I think you do. He exhaled heavily. I thought if I looked successful enough eventually, I'd feel successful. And did you? No. His voice trembled. I've been terrified for months. The words poured out. The payments. The debt. The credit cards. The bank. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't tell anybody. I listened. For the first time in years, my son was not performing. He was simply talking. And beneath the expensive house, beneath the polished shoes, beneath the forced confidence, I found the little boy who used to come to me during thunderstorms. Finally, he asked, "Were you disappointed in me?" I looked at Miguel's photograph. Sometimes. He began crying, real crying, not quiet, not hidden. The sound broke my heart. "I'm sorry, Mom." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I heard Miguel's voice. "Tell Danny I'm proud of him." Not because he was perfect, because he was trying. "I know you are." "No." He struggled to speak. "I mean, about the phone." I looked down at it, the cracked screen, the faded case, the memories. "The phone isn't what hurt me." "What did—" I answered honestly, "Feeling like you were ashamed of me." He cried harder. "I'm not." "Sometimes you are." "No. Sometimes you are, Daniel." The truth needed to live between us. He didn't argue, because he knew. Finally, he whispered, "I don't want Lily to become me." The sentence surprised me. "What do you mean?" "Someone who cares more about appearances than people." Tears rolled down my face, because perhaps finally he understood. Before hanging up, he said, "I need some time." "I know, and I want to come see you." "When you're ready." He hesitated. I listened to Dad's message. My heart stopped. "The one on your phone." "What did you think?" he cried again. "He said he was proud of me." I looked at the old phone, the phone Daniel had laughed at, the phone that carried his father's voice, the phone that had outlived pride, the phone that had preserved love. And suddenly, I realized something. The mortgage had saved Daniel's house, but perhaps that old phone was about to save his heart. Daniel came the following Saturday. He arrived alone. No Megan, no Lily. Just my son standing in my driveway beside his car, looking older than I had ever seen him. I was watering the roses when he pulled in. For a moment, neither of us moved. The autumn wind carried fallen leaves across the yard. The same yard where he had played baseball. The same porch where Miguel used to drink coffee every morning. Daniel stepped out slowly. He wasn't wearing expensive clothes, no polished shoes, no business jacket, just jeans and a gray sweater. He looked less like a successful executive, more like my son. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Daniel." For a second, it seemed as though we didn't know how to greet each other. Then he walked forward and hugged me. Not the quick embrace from the party, not the polite hug given to a parent. This one lasted. His shoulders trembled. When he stepped back, his eyes were red. "Can I come in?" "Of course." The house looked exactly as it always had. The same sofa, the same photographs, the same old clock in the hallway, the same curtains, the same kitchen table. Daniel slowly looked around, as though seeing everything for the first time. "You never changed anything." I smiled. I liked it. He touched the back of one of the kitchen chairs. "I used to sit here and do homework." "You complained about math." He laughed softly. "I still hate math." For a few moments, things felt normal. Then reality returned. I made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. The silence between us was not uncomfortable, only heavy. Finally, he spoke. I went to the lake. My hands stopped. You did? The realtor had the sign up. I nodded. It sold. He looked down. You sold your dream. The words hurt because they were true. I sat across from him. Dreams change. No. He shook his head. You and Dad wanted that place. We did. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't let me. He stared at the table. I continued gently. You were drowning Daniel. I know. You were pretending. I know. You laughed at me because you were ashamed. His eyes filled again. I wasn't ashamed of you. Then what? He struggled to answer. Finally, he whispered, I was ashamed of myself. The room became quiet. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, 43 years of pride slowly began to break. I couldn't pay the bills. He looked down. I couldn't sleep. His voice cracked. I kept thinking Dad would never fail like this. I answered softly. Your father failed many times. He looked up. What? He lost jobs. He worried about money. He made mistakes. Daniel looked surprised. Dad never told me. Because fathers protect their children. I smiled sadly. And mothers protect them when they grow up. He covered his face with his hands. I don't deserve what you did. Perhaps that was the sentence he had been carrying all week. I reached across the table. I touched his hand. This isn't about deserving. Then what is it about? Love. He cried quietly. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes moved toward the counter. The old phone sat there. The same phone. The same cracked screen. He stood slowly. He picked it up carefully, the way someone might hold something fragile. I'm sorry. The words were directed toward the phone, toward his father, toward me, toward himself. I was cruel. I nodded. Yes. I don't know why. I stood beside him. Sometimes people who feel small try to make someone else smaller. He stared at the screen. Dad's still in here. Yes. He sat back down. Can I hear him? My throat tightened. I picked up the phone. The battery had become weak. The speaker crackled. Miguel's voice filled the kitchen. Hey, Angie. Daniel closed his eyes. Tell Danny I'm proud of him. My son began crying immediately, not quietly, not carefully. Years of fear, years of pressure, years of pretending. All of it came out. The message ended. Daniel covered his face. He was always proud of me. Yes. Even now. Especially now. He looked confused. Why now? I smiled gently. Because now you're telling the truth. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then, I almost lost everything. No. He looked at me. What do you mean? You almost lost a house. He remained silent. I continued. You still have Megan. You still have Lily. You still have your father's memory. You still have your family. He looked around the kitchen, the old cabinets, the faded wallpaper. the worn floor, the things he once wanted to escape. I spent my entire life trying not to live like this. I smiled. And yet you're sitting here. He laughed softly. I guess I am. At lunchtime, I made grilled cheese sandwiches, the same ones he loved as a child. Tomato soup, pickles. Nothing expensive, nothing impressive. But Daniel ate quietly, slowly, as if tasting his childhood. After lunch, he walked through the house, his old bedroom, the hallway, the garage, the backyard. Every room contained memories. Every memory contained something money could not buy. As the afternoon faded, he stood beside the roses. They finally bloomed. Just one, he smiled. Dad always said they were stubborn. He was right. We sat on the porch. The sun slowly disappeared. Finally, he asked, "What do I do now?" The question surprised me. 43 years old, successful career, large house, and suddenly he was a little boy again. I answered honestly, "You tell Megan the truth." "I have." "You stop pretending." He nodded. "You spend time with Lily." He nodded again. "And," I looked at him carefully, "you forgive yourself." He looked away. "I don't know how." "Neither did I after your father died." He became quiet. For the first time that day, peace settled between us. Not complete healing. That takes time. But something important had changed. The distance between us had begun to disappear. Before leaving, he walked into the kitchen one final time. He picked up the old phone. "Would you ever let me fix the screen?" I smiled. "No." He laughed. "Why not?" "Because some broken things remind us what matters." He looked at the phone, then at me. And for the first time in many years, I saw not the successful man, not the frightened homeowner, not the embarrassed son. I saw Daniel, my son, and I realized that paying off his mortgage had saved his house. But sitting together in that old kitchen might finally save our family. 2 weeks later, Daniel came back. This time, he did not come alone. Megan sat beside him in the car. Lily was in the back seat. When I opened the front door, Lily ran toward me exactly as she always had. "Grandma!" She wrapped her arms around my waist. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not mortgages, not money, not mistakes. Only a little girl hugging her grandmother. Megan followed her inside. She looked different. Still tired, but lighter somehow. As if someone had finally removed a heavy weight from her shoulders. Daniel entered last. He carried 2 grocery bags. "I brought lunch." I smiled. "You never bring lunch." He laughed. "I know." The laughter sounded genuine. Not the forced laughter from the party. Not the nervous laughter of a frightened man. Real laughter. The kind I had not heard from him in years. The kitchen quickly filled with activity. Lily helped set the table. Megan prepared salad. Daniel unpacked sandwiches. For the first time in a very long time, my house felt full again. The old clock ticked. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Sunlight entered through the faded curtains. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. During lunch, Lily talked about school, her spelling tests, her teacher, her best friend. Children continue living while adults become trapped inside worries. Perhaps that is one reason they save us. At one point, Lily looked at Daniel. "Dad doesn't work at night anymore." Daniel smiled awkwardly. "No, I don't." Megan looked at me. "He actually sleeps." Daniel laughed. I didn't realize everyone was monitoring me. We were, Megan said. He became quiet. For a moment, guilt appeared again. But this time, he didn't hide from it. I wasn't very pleasant. Megan raised an eyebrow. That's one way to say it. Even I laughed. The tension that had ruled their home for months had begun to disappear. After lunch, Lily asked to hear Grandpa's message again. We sat together in the living room. The old phone rested in my hands. The screen flickered. Miguel's voice filled the room. Hey, Angie? Lily smiled. Megan lowered her eyes. Daniel sat completely still. Tell Danny I'm proud of him. The message ended. Nobody spoke. Finally, Lily said, Grandpa always sounds happy. Daniel answered quietly. He usually was. She looked at him. Are you happy now? The question caught all of us by surprise. Children ask questions adults avoid. Daniel thought carefully. Finally, he answered, I think I'm learning how. Lily seemed satisfied. She ran outside to play in the yard. The adults remained inside. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Megan reached into her purse. She placed an envelope on the table. What's this? I asked. She looked at Daniel. He nodded. She pushed it toward me. Inside was a document. I recognized it immediately. The deed to the lake property. My hands began to shake. I looked up. What is this? Daniel spoke softly. I bought it back. I stared at him. What? The couple agreed to sell. My eyes filled with tears. Daniel, I used my bonus. You don't have to. I know. The room became quiet. I can't give you back everything. His voice trembled. I can't repay what you did. I looked at the papers, the lake, the dream, the future Miguel and I had imagined, returning, slowly, unexpectedly. I wanted you to have it. I couldn't speak. Daniel continued. I know Dad loved that place. He did. And I know you did too. Tears rolled down my face. I thought it was gone. He nodded. So did I. For several seconds, nobody moved. Finally, I whispered, Why? His answer came immediately. Because you taught me that family comes first. The words nearly broke me. Because they had once belonged to Miguel. Because perhaps Daniel had finally remembered. Megan spoke quietly. He spent 2 weeks making arrangements. Daniel looked embarrassed. It wasn't easy. I smiled through tears. Neither was paying off your mortgage. For the first time, we all laughed. Not because something was funny, because something had healed. Later that afternoon, Daniel and I sat alone on the porch. The sun was beginning to set. The roses had finally bloomed. Several flowers now covered the bushes. He looked at them. Dad would love these. He would. He became quiet. Then he said, I was angry. At me. At myself. I listened. When you paid the mortgage, I felt like a failure. I nodded. I know. I spent my whole life trying to become successful. He looked at the neighborhood, the trees, the old houses, the familiar street. And then I realized something. What? I never understood what success looked like. I smiled. What does it look like now? He thought carefully. A family that still answers the phone. A daughter who isn't afraid. A wife who can sleep. He looked at me. A mother who sacrifices everything and doesn't ask for credit. Tears filled my eyes. He continued. And an old phone that kept my father's voice alive. The wind moved through the yard. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he reached into his pocket. He handed me a small box. What's this? Open it. Inside was a new smartphone. I laughed immediately. Oh no. He smiled. I know. You know I'm not replacing the old one. I know. Then why buy this? He looked embarrassed. Because Lily wants to text you. I laughed harder. And the old phone barely charges. I looked at the new device, then at him. I'll keep both. His face relaxed. Good. The old one stays. It should. He looked toward the living room window. The old phone sat on the table, the same phone he had mocked. The same phone that carried his father's voice. The same phone that had quietly changed his life. As the sun disappeared, Daniel spoke one final sentence, the sentence I had waited months to hear. I'm proud to be your son. My throat tightened because the little boy who once bought me a drugstore bracelet had finally come home. Winter arrived early that year. By December, snow had already covered the sidewalks in Toledo. The trees stood bare against gray skies, and the mornings became quieter than ever. But something inside me had changed. The house no longer felt empty. Not because Miguel had returned, not because grief had disappeared, but because my family had found its way back. Daniel called every Sunday, sometimes every Wednesday, sometimes simply to ask what I had eaten for dinner. At first, the conversations felt awkward. He seemed careful, almost afraid, as if one wrong sentence might reopen the wound between us, but healing rarely happens all at once. It happens through ordinary moments. One afternoon, he called to ask for my chili recipe. Another evening, he wanted to know how his father had repaired an old furnace. Small questions, simple conversations, yet each one built a bridge. Christmas approached. For the first time in 4 years, Daniel suggested that everyone spend Christmas Eve at my house. When he asked, I remained silent for several seconds. Mom, are you sure? Yes. The house is small. I know. The guest room isn't comfortable. I know. The kitchen table only seats 6. He laughed softly. We only need 4. The old Daniel would never have suggested it. The old Daniel wanted large rooms, perfect decorations, impressive dinners. The new Daniel wanted home, and perhaps that was the greatest gift of all. During the week before Christmas, Lily called almost every evening. She had learned how to use the new phone Daniel had bought me. Grandma, are the cookies ready? Not yet. Did you decorate the tree? Almost. Can I help? Of course. One afternoon, Daniel arrived alone carrying several boxes. What's all this? Christmas decorations. I laughed. You hate decorating. I used to. We spent the entire afternoon pulling ornaments from old boxes. Some belonged to Miguel. Others belonged to Daniel's childhood. One ornament stopped him. A small wooden star. He held it carefully. I made this in 3rd grade. You were very proud of it. He smiled. It's terrible. It's beautiful. He turned it over. On the back, written in childish handwriting, were the words, for Mom. His eyes became wet. I forgot this existed. I didn't. He looked around the living room, the old furniture, the photographs, the worn carpet, the house he had once considered outdated. How did I stop seeing all this? I understood the question. Success had blinded him. Fear had blinded him. Shame had blinded him. I answered honestly. Life gets loud. He nodded. It really does. That evening, after decorating the tree, he sat quietly beside the fireplace. The old phone rested on the mantel. He looked at it. I still can't believe I laughed at that. I smiled. I can. He looked surprised. Why? Because you were scared. He became quiet. I was. The fire crackled softly. Snow fell outside. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I thought people respected money. What do you think now? I think people respect honesty. I nodded. He continued. When I was a kid, I wanted to become Dad. I smiled. You did. He shook his head. No. He looked down. I became someone who cared about what strangers thought. His voice became softer. Dad cared about what family thought. The room became quiet. Because it was true. On Christmas Eve, the house became alive again. Megan brought pies. Daniel cooked ham. Lily decorated cookies. Christmas music played from the radio. The kitchen became crowded, the way it used to be when Miguel was alive. At one point, Lily ran upstairs and returned carrying the old phone. Can Grandpa join Christmas? The room became silent. Daniel looked at me. Megan wiped her eyes. I took the phone. The battery had become weak again. I pressed play. Miguel's voice filled the room. Hey, Angie. Nobody moved. Tell Danny I'm proud of him. Daniel lowered his head. And tell my little Lily that Grandpa loves her. The message ended. Silence. Then Lily smiled. He's here. No one disagreed. After dinner, gifts were opened. Lily received books. Megan received a necklace. Daniel gave me a framed photograph. When I opened it, tears immediately appeared. The picture had been taken weeks earlier. Me sitting on my porch. Daniel beside me. Lily between us. The old phone resting in my lap. At the bottom of the frame, he had engraved words. Family first. Miguel's words. I looked at him. When did you do this? He smiled. A while ago. The evening grew late. Snow continued falling. Lily eventually fell asleep on the couch. Megan covered her with a blanket. Daniel and I washed dishes together. Just like years ago. Finally, he looked at me. I need to tell you something. I waited. I sold the second car. I looked surprised. The SUV. He nodded. We don't need it. And we refinanced some other debt. I smiled. Good. He continued. We're living differently now. What does that mean? He laughed softly. It means Megan handles the budget. From the living room, Megan called, Absolutely. We all laughed. But then Daniel became serious. I don't ever want to live that way again. What way? Pretending. He dried his hands. I nearly lost my family trying to impress people who don't even remember my name. The truth of those words settled heavily between us, because many people at that party had already disappeared. The co-workers, the neighbors, the guests, the people he had wanted to impress. But his family remained. The people he had ignored, the people who loved him. Before leaving that night, he hugged me tightly. Thank you. I smiled. You've already thanked me. No. His voice trembled. I mean, for not giving up on me. I looked at my son. The frightened man had disappeared. The proud man had softened. The little boy had returned. And for the first time in many years, I realized something. I had not only saved his house, I had helped him find his way home. Spring arrived quietly. The snow disappeared. The trees began to bloom. And for the first time in several years, my house no longer felt like a place where grief lived alone. Life had returned. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly. The way healing usually comes. One Saturday morning, Lily and I planted flowers in the garden. The roses had survived another winter. Several new buds had appeared. Lily knelt beside me. Grandma? Yes. When people get old, do they become sad? Children ask impossible questions. I thought carefully. Sometimes. Why? Because they lose people they love. She looked at the house. Like Grandpa? Yes. She became quiet. But you aren't sad all the time anymore. I smiled. No. Why not? I looked toward the porch. Daniel stood beside Megan, carrying bags of soil. Both of them were laughing. Real laughter. The kind that comes from peace. Because sometimes love comes back in different ways. She seemed to think about that. Like Dad? Exactly. The truth was that Daniel had changed. Not perfectly. People rarely change perfectly. But honestly, the expensive SUV was gone. The second credit card had been closed. The unnecessary expenses had disappeared. He and Megan had begun meeting with a financial advisor. Most importantly, they talked to each other again. No more secrets. No more pretending. One afternoon, Daniel told me, I finally know how much things cost. I laughed. Everything. No, he smiled. But enough. Another change surprised me. He began visiting Robert Thompson. At first, I thought it concerned paperwork. Later, I learned something else. He simply wanted advice. Robert told me, he asks questions your father used to ask. That sentence stayed with me. Perhaps Daniel had finally stopped trying to become someone else. Perhaps he had finally allowed himself to become his father's son. One evening in April, the entire family drove to the lake. The property was ours again. The old couple who sold it back had never built anything there. The land remained untouched. Trees, water, silence. Daniel stood beside me near the shore. The sun reflected across the lake. I understand now. I looked at him. What? Why you loved this place? I smiled. Your father loved it first. He nodded. I think I do too. For a while, we simply stood together. The wind moved gently across the water. Birds passed overhead. Peace surrounded us. Finally, Daniel spoke. I spent years chasing bigger things. He looked at the lake. And Dad wanted this. I smiled. He was smarter than both of us. Daniel laughed. That's true. He became serious again. I used to think you and Dad didn't have enough. And now? He looked at me. You had everything. The words filled my heart. Because after all these months, after all the fear and pride and mistakes, my son finally understood. Not wealth, not success. Enough. Miguel had understood enough. I had understood enough. Now Daniel did too. Later that afternoon, Lily asked if she could hear Grandpa's message again. The old phone came out. The same phone, the same cracked screen, the same faded case. The battery barely lasted anymore. Daniel sat beside me. Megan held Lily. The message played. "Hey, Angie." The wind carried Miguel's voice across the lake. "Tell Danny I'm proud of him." Daniel closed his eyes. "And tell my little Lily that Grandpa loves her." When the message ended, nobody spoke. Finally, Daniel whispered, "I think he knew." Knew what? That one day, I'd need to hear that. I looked toward the water. Maybe he did. Several weeks later, Daniel invited me to dinner. Not at a restaurant, at his house, the same house, the house I had saved. But now it felt different. The tension had disappeared. The fear was gone. The kitchen where arguments once lived had become warm again. At one point, Daniel walked into the living room carrying something. A small wooden box. He placed it beside me. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a new plaque. Simple. Beautiful. The words were engraved carefully. "Family first." Below those words, in memory of Miguel Reyes, and underneath, "Thank you, Mom." I could not speak. Tears filled my eyes. Daniel sat beside me. "You gave us our home." I shook my head. "No." He smiled. "Yes." I looked around the room, Lily doing homework, Megan laughing in the kitchen, the sounds of family. Perhaps he was right, but not in the way he believed. I had not saved the house. The house had saved itself. What truly needed saving was something else. Pride, fear, distance, silence. The things that separate families. As evening arrived, Lily climbed into my lap. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Will you ever get rid of your old phone?" Everyone laughed. I looked at Daniel. He smiled. "Don't ask me." I held the phone carefully. Miguel's photograph still appeared on the screen. The cracks remained, the scratches remained, the memories remained. "No," Lily smiled. "Good. Why?" "Because Grandpa lives there." Daniel looked down. His eyes filled again, and suddenly I realized something. My son had laughed at my old phone because he thought it represented everything he wanted to escape. The old house, the old life, the old fears. But he was wrong. That phone represented love, sacrifice, memory, family. And in the end, it became the thing that reminded him who he truly was. As I drove home that night, the old phone rested beside me, the same place it had rested after the party. Only now, everything was different. My son no longer laughed at it. My granddaughter treasured it. My husband still spoke through it. And I finally understood something myself. The greatest inheritance parents leave behind is not money, not property, not houses. It is the example of how to love people when they disappoint you. When I pulled into my driveway, the stars were bright. The porch light glowed softly. I carried the old phone inside. I placed it beside Miguel's photograph. And before turning off the light, I whispered, "He finally came home." Somewhere inside, the silence, I thought I heard my husband answer. I always knew he would.